position state that every AA group ought to be self-supporting, defining outside contributions. I'm going to pass the basket. This is a weekly step meeting. Our format is as follows. The speaker is asked to talk for 25 to 30 minutes on the step of that week, followed by discussion or questions until 7 p.m. You can find these weekly meetings on our YouTube page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and share. That brings us to the speaker portion of the meeting on this day, August 29th, 2022, in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, at the Monday night, 6 p.m. Stay Alive Literature and Step Group at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Tonight's speaker is Bill, and he'll be sharing his experience, strength, hope, and whatever else he would like to share with us. So please help me welcome Bill.
Hey, thanks everybody. I'm Bill and I'm an alcoholic. And Carolyn mentioned this is a step meeting, and since I was hijacked on my way in, and asked to speak, I'm going to share a little bit about my story. I really want to focus on 2 and 3 because for me they were. It was, as I tell my story, I hope that I can put across, the 2 and 3 was the make or break for my program, okay? Step 1, I honestly believe I took step 1 the day before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And as you hear my story, I hope that you'll think that too. I grew up in, my sobriety date is September 19th, 1977. And I grew up in North Philadelphia, early 60s, 14-year-old kid, 15-year-old kid. Church was very much a part of my, I went to Sunday school, I went to at 9 a.m., church at 11, and then we had a youth group called Luther League. We were all Lutherans. I'm a Viking, so we were all Lutherans, right? I'm sorry, guys, no Irish Catholics tonight. It's like, it's going to be all Viking, it's going to be all Viking all the time, right? So, that Sunday evening group was really very important, and all in all, from my attendance and from my participation in other church activities, I was far from a holy roller, but I was just a normal teenager in 1963, walking down the street, right? And my spiritual development was right on track for that. Well, I started drinking alcoholically at 15, and that was immediately stripped away. Alcohol, that was the first thing that alcohol tore away from me. And I was unable, either right away or for many years, I was unable to get back to that church, but we'll talk about that also. I drank on weekends. Cars are a big part of my stories too. We all used to work in cars in different garages, and in the back of the garage there were always cases of beer stacked up. And we never drank during the week, but on Saturday night we'd work on the cars all day, then we'd go home and get cleaned up, and we'd come back, everybody'd have a beer. But see, that's when something funny started to happen. One guy would have 1 beer and he had a date, so he had to go, right? Another guy was gone bowling, so he had 2 beers. What's wrong? You can't fly on 1 wing. What's wrong with you guys, right? But it turned out that's the pattern for my life going forward. It wound up with me and this one other guy sitting in a garage drinking beer until there was almost no more left to drink. Now, on a night like tonight, that might be nice. But the night that I always remember was some night in February when it was a cold rain and it was falling on top of snow and it was about 27 degrees and we're sitting in the back of that garage slugging beer. I mean, I knew something was not right, but, I really couldn't identify it. Both my parents were alcoholics, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that. But I managed to get out of high school. My studies always came easy to me, so I never had to spend a lot of time with that. I could spend more time working on cars. I worked a year after I got out of high school, and then I went up to Penn State, right? And that was Self-Will Run Riot. That was the house off campus with the keg of beer in the living room and 6 guys, and it was just a party. That set the tone for my drinking in two ways going forward. One, it was an endless party. It was always a party. Life was a party. If you couldn't party, it wasn't worth it. But the other thing was my self-will. The big book talks about self-will run riot. That was where my self-will was cultivated, and then all through the rest of my drinking, that's what kept me. That's how alcohol kept me enslaved. The other thing was that Penn State has a 10-week semester, and even though my work was really good right up to week 9, something started to happen in my behavior. I would get to the last week and I'd get drunk and miss a final. I'd get to the last week and I'd decide it was time for a road trip, and I'd hitchhike out to Chicago and I'd miss all the finals. And it was just, or worse, I'd come to class half shot in the ass and I'd mouth off to a professor. That was, I think that was the ultimate. That was when the university, in a meeting with the dean, that was when the university decided that maybe I should pursue my excellence someplace else, right? So, bummed around the country for a while, got married, and the way that life evolved, my wife was she was my drinking buddy. She was a partier. We were in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. We were both working in supermarkets. We drank with the people we worked with. Everybody knew everybody else. It was really a great existence until it wasn't. I mentioned cars were an important part of my story, right? Drinking and driving was never a problem. A couple people in here might remember, but this is a pretty young crowd. Back in the 70s, if you were pulled over, DUI was not the first priority for the officer. A field sobriety test was, you could refuse a field sobriety test and there was no problem. As long as you didn't take a swing at anybody, you were okay. And that's what used to happen. I started getting pulled over, and if I was pulled over in Cherry Hill, the cops, I knew all the cops and they knew me. So it was, Bill, we're going to lock up the car, we're going to run you to Ponzio's, we're going to get lunch, you're going to have a cup of coffee, and you're going to call somebody to come get you. Or, Bill, we're going to lock up the car, we're going to drive you home, And that was fine. Until one night, we were the party of all parties. My wife and I were driving to Atlantic City, and I was into souping up Volkswagens. I was driving a gold metal flake Volkswagen, right? And I got pulled over, and it was a sergeant. I'll never forget, Sergeant Jones from the Egg Harbor Township. He says, Bill, I gotta lock you up. He says, I can't. I had refused field sobriety. I had refused, doing all that. I told him I had a couple beers. I think that was it, but I wouldn't say anything else. He says, I got to lock you up. So I got locked up, and I was ROR'd. I never understood that. But now I'm in a jam, okay? Now when you trot out one of those foxhole prayers, Well, my dad had gone to Livingren. He had recovered. My dad had 4 years sobriety at that time, right? So I went to him and I talked to him, and he said, son, you got to take care of this. He gave me the name of an attorney. But from then on, when I was going to work, I'd open my lunch and there was AA literature in my lunch. My dad had stuffed that in there. He knew more what I needed than I knew, right? Well, that charge was dismissed, and what I had done, I had not drunk all that summer, right? Well, it was 6.5 months until the trial. Case was dismissed. Well, that's a green light to drink, right, guys? I mean, come on, that's permission. But see, here's something I didn't understand. I thought if you stopped and then you started again, it was like you were at point A. This is a progressive disease. It continues to progress, even if you're not drinking. So when I started that October, I was off to the races. And of course, it wasn't long until I was arrested again. Got to the point where my biggest expense, bigger than my rent, was paying off the attorneys. You know, the loans, somebody had loaned me money, making the payments on the loans to pay off the attorneys. And that continued until September 17th, 1977, which was a Saturday. And the funny thing is, that drunk was like 1,000 before it, right? I had no I had no memory, total blackout, right? Pissed myself, thrown up, right? And what woke me up was the telephone. And I knew whatever was on the other end of that phone was whatever the hell I had done the night before. And that's when that fear starts. That starts right in here and comes up and grabs you. So I knew I was done. Now, fortunately with my dad, I knew where I should go. So the next day was September 18th. I had 2 beers in the morning. The next day was September 19th. I walked into the Camelon Club, which was a clubhouse on the waterfront of New Jersey, right? Camden, New Jersey. So I'm sitting in the parking lot, and you know my life is over. I'm not going to be able to drink anymore, so there's going to be no more fun. There's going to be nothing to live for. There's going to be no more good times, right? So I walk into the clubhouse. The first guy I meet is a guy named Machine Gun Jack, right? Machine Gun Jack brought me my first cup of coffee in AA. Jack introduced me to Iron Mike the Roofer, right? And then I met Sailor Bill, and you know, I'm there. Well, this is great. This cast of characters is going to help me get a better. No. Well, wait a minute. There's a guy in the corner in a 3-piece suit, so I'll go sit next to him. So I go sit next to him, and he says, my name is Frank M. He said, but these guys call me Flaky Frank. He said, and you will. He said, and you will too. So the meeting starts, and there's really only a couple things I remember. One is how it works. And ever since then, every time I hear how it works, I get something new out of it. And the other thing was they did anniversaries. And a couple people, I don't know, somebody had 2 years, and maybe somebody had a year. One person had 90 days. 90 days. That person went 3 months without a drink. How the hell did he do it, right? That was my hook. So, end of the meeting, Sailor Bill chaired. So at the end of the meeting, he says, look, Billy, he says, don't drink today, come back tomorrow, your life will get better beyond your wildest dreams. I'm there, what the hell does that mean, right? But I came back. So, the schedule, Camelon Club had meetings every day. I attended meetings every day, right? When I made 30 days, one of the guys, Billy G, comes up to me, and he's got my big book. He said, the guys and I chipped in for this big book. He says, we did it for your father. He says, none of us are that crazy about you, but we want you to have this book, right? So he gave me the big book, and I began working with my sponsor. As I said, I believe because of my experience, I took step 1 before I came in. Well, now I got to work on 2 and 3, right? And it was not happening. It was, I told myself that I was reading, and I was talking to people, and I was, I was really trying to, it's like BS. I mean, I worked as hard as I could with my sponsor, but the answer all the time was right in front of me, right? At the end of step 3, last page, guys, in italics, it says, our whole trouble had been the misuse of willpower. We had tried to bombard our problems with it instead of attempting to bring it into agreement with God's intention for us. So, like 1 week, I would get that, and my sponsor would say, did you read step 3? Yeah, okay. And then the next week he'd say, did you read the last page, And then the next week I'd find my book, it was highlighted, right? But I still wasn't getting it. I was bombarding it, right? Until finally, after just about a year, I was one of the members in our group was a Catholic priest, and speaking with him, all of a sudden he turned to me, and I had heard this 100 times before, but that day it made sense. He turned to me, he said, Billy, he said, you can't, he can, let him. And that was it. It was like, people talk about having, like having a revelation, and I think that overstates it, but that's exactly what happened, because then the rest of the steps pretty much fell in place for me, right? At 18 months sobriety for me, my dad passed away, okay, 79 years old. So I got called at work. I was in the middle of the night, I got called at work, and I went to the hospital and helped them with his body. And then I went to see my grandmother. You know, his mother was still alive, and I told her that she's going to have to bury her youngest son, right? Then we went to the funeral home together, and all this time I'm not crying, right? So I get to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I drove to the Camelon Club, and that's where I cried for my dad. I cried with Machine Gun Jack and Flaky Frank, and you know, that was where, they were the ones. They knew him, and that was where my sorrow could really come out. So, 2 years, Sailor Bill comes to me at 2 years. Usually I have the coin. I don't have it tonight, but he gives me a 2-year coin. He says, Billy, he said, here's our 2-year coin. He said, of course it's for year 2. He said, it's for that second step, he said, which you had so much trouble with. He said, and finally, he said, it's for the 2 of us. He says, because we're together all our lives, you know. I still have the coin. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit, because what happened, I was able to get back to school. All of a sudden, you know, dry up, clear up. You're going to dry up, clear up, and you're going to grow up, right? When I cleared up, I realized it was time to get back to school. So I was able to earn not only my undergraduate degree, I was able to go on for a master's degree. I was able to build a career in finance and treasury. At the same time, never losing sight of the fact that the backbone of all this was the principles and programs of Alcoholics Anonymous and maintaining my contact with others. One of my dad's favorite sayings in all of AA is Bill's, I am responsible. And if there was one thing he wanted me never to forget, was that I am responsible, and I'm hoping that I've lived up to that. And the other thing I like to talk about, with all the work that I've done, I got to travel around the country quite a bit. So I've had the gift of attending AA meetings in different parts of the country and seeing how the program runs there. I think I did 15 years. I think I did 15 years in Chicago. I did 20 years. 20 years was in Atlanta, and that was kind of neat. 25 was out on the West Coast. Coronado Island is an island that's right next to San Diego, and there's a huge naval base just to the south of it. And there's a clubhouse right on Coronado Island. So if you attend a meeting in this clubhouse, and by the way, there's meetings from 7 a.m. until 10 at night, every hour and a half. You attend a meeting there, you could be sitting next to a Navy SEAL, or you could be sitting next to an executive getting ready. You'd be sitting next to a beach bum, right? Well, I happened to be there for my 25th anniversary. So I announced it, and they went, and they were looking for a coin, and they said, Billy, they said, we don't have a 25. They said, could you take 2 10s and a 5, right? 30 years, I was somewhere for 30, but 35 I was on Cape Cod. If you ever get to Cape Cod, there's a clubhouse. By the way, I love clubhouses. You guys probably figured that out, right? There's a clubhouse on the North Shore called the Dry Dock Inn. You walk in, and the sign they have in front, it says 1 tide at a time, right? So I had announced at the beginning that I had 35 years. Well, they had a greeter, right? She took her 35-year coin. She had a card. They passed that card around during the meeting, and they gave it to me at the end of the meeting. Now, we all know how special this program is, but for me, that was really a moment that brought it home, right? That 35-year coin, one of my sponsees, when she had 35 years, I passed that coin on to her, and that started the tradition. On every 5 years, my coin from that 5-year, I pass on to this particular sponsee. This year, I'm getting ready to pass her. In December, I'm going to pass her my 40, and it's like this program. There is so much in this program for we come in and we think we're just getting away from a drink. We're just going to put down. That's just the start. We used to have a guy who used to attend these meetings. Some of you may remember Miracle Walt. Everything was a miracle to Walt. You know, you're all miracles, we're all miracles. Walt, he was not overstating it. Think about where we've been. think about how far we've come, and what's most important, since, think about how far we all have to go. I guess that's about it. It brings us up to date. I'm still as active as I ever was, and to me, that's the key to the program. I always think about it. Some of our meetings, you'll hear the promises, the AA promises. Billy G from the Camelot Club, he was big on the promises, and you'll hear about how there'll be we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. Well, I'm a little more than halfway through. I'm amazed every day. And there's one other quick thing. Remember my ex-wife, that party girl from all the way back in the 70s? About 3 years ago, I get a phone call, right? And I was really glad to see. So we talked a little bit. I kept saying, who's this reasonable person? Because when we partied, you could imagine there was quite a bit of fireworks, right? Who's this reasonable person? She said, I called. You can congratulate me. She said, I just celebrated 25 years. So that's all I got. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so please limit your sharing to 3 minutes. Please keep your shares related to the topic. If you feel like drinking, or if you had a drink today, please see me or speak to someone after the meeting. We ask that you please refrain from the use of profanity. We are in a church and on a spiritual journey. So I will now open up the meeting. If you would like to share.